Welcome back to another episode of Free Me from OCD. I'm your host, Dr. Vicki Rackner, and today we have an important topic to discuss: disappointment. In the last episode, we talked about how you can manage your own disappointment. In this episode, we'll talk about what you do when your child is disappointed. Welcome to the Free Me from OCD podcast. If you or someone you love has OCD, you know that OCD can hold you hostage. OCD can get in the driver's seat of your life. Here you'll find the information, tips, and tools to put you back in the driver's seat of your life. I'm Dr. Vicki Rackner, your host. I call on my experience as a mother of a son diagnosed with OCD when he was in college, physician, and life coach to help you evolve into the best and highest version of yourself. Let's dive into today's episode. Let's kick the conversation off with a story. When my son was in Little League, I set a goal of attending all of his games. Then I got an invitation to speak at a business meeting. However, accepting that invitation meant missing one or maybe two games. What do? I called my own parenting coach to discuss it. She said, let's say you accept the invitation to speak. So life happened and you can't be there for one game. Yes, your son will be disappointed. Why are you making your son's disappointment into such a big problem? Her question stopped me in my tracks. Then she gently continued, maybe this is your son's chance to get some experience managing disappointment. And it's your chance to see he can live through it. So in this podcast episode, I'd like to offer some insights into why our kids' disappointment tends to be such a big problem for us parents. I'll also lay out the price everyone pays when you're unwilling to live with the discomfort of disappointment. Last, I'd like to share with you what you can do when your child is disappointed. First, though, what is disappointment? Disappointment is the feeling you get when people or events or circumstances don't turn out the way you hoped or expected. That's all disappointment is, a feeling. Now, you arrived into adulthood mastering the lessons your parents taught you about how to manage feelings, including disappointment. When I myself was a child, life felt chaotic. While my mom did her very best, she often broke her promises she made to me. I was disappointed every time it happened, but my mom would get angry if I told her I was disappointed. I learned to protect myself by abandoning the idea I could count on my mom. It's no surprise that keeping my promises is one of my highest values as a parent, and why I would resist even the possibility that my son would be disappointed in the future. Here are some things you might have been taught when you were a kid. You might have been taught, let's pretend painful feelings like disappointment don't exist. My family taught me this. Don't talk about disappointment. If you're disappointed, pretend everything is okay. On a very basic level, our human brain tells us to seek pleasure and to avoid pain. If you try to distract yourself or numb your unpleasant feelings, you're not alone. Lots of people prefer a glass of wine or shopping or eating to sitting with an unpleasant feeling for 2 minutes. However, any attempt to resist or numb or avoid feelings makes them worse. Further, now your brain believes that disappointment is dangerous and should be avoided in the future. You may have been taught to pull out the ABCs, accuse, blame, and criticize. Your brain is a sense-making machine. It wants to create a story that explains why things are as they are. When you're disappointed, your human brain wants to point the finger at somebody who did something wrong, and it's most often the person in the mirror. There are many reasons that bad outcomes happen, and most times it's nobody's fault. If you've ever had an operation, your surgeon had a conversation called informed consent, in which they share the benefits of the procedure and warned you about the potential risks. As a way of saying you understand, you sign the consent form and go to the operating room. Well, what happens if you get a post-op infection? Intellectually, you know that this could happen because the surgeon specifically said it could. Still, your human brain will want to find somebody or something to blame. However, in most cases, everyone did everything right. As they say, stuff happens. You might have been taught to see disappointment as a punishment rather than as a teacher. When you try something and don't get the results you want, it's often described as a failure. Thomas Edison made about 1,000 unsuccessful attempts at inventing the light bulb. When a reporter asked, "How did it feel to fail 1,000 times?" Edison replied, "I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps." How often did your parents say to you, "What can you learn from this experience?" Most people say never. This means that you don't get insights or guidance about how to create different results next time. You might have been taught to avoid circumstances that might lead to disappointment. If somebody was disappointed after they tried a new restaurant, they might avoid trying other new restaurants to protect themselves from being disappointed again. Maybe they don't go after the new job or ask for that raise. If a friend lets them down, they may decide not to try to make new friends or find a new life partner. As an aside, most people believe that their circumstances cause the disappointment. Your experience with OCD helps you understand that that's not true. Your circumstances don't create your feelings. The thoughts about your circumstances create your feelings. Let's say a car with a license plate ending in the number 7 crossed your path. This is a neutral circumstance. You might not have even noticed. However, if your child with OCD sees the license plate and thinks 7 is an unlucky number and bad things will happen, that thought creates a feeling. In fact, for some kids, it's an avalanche of anxiety. Then they launch into their compulsions to get temporary relief from the anxiety. So your thoughts about circumstances, not the circumstances themselves, lead to the feeling. You might have been taught to avoid actions that might lead somebody else to be disappointed. As I considered the speaking invitation, I just assumed that my son would be disappointed if I didn't attend a game. But I don't know because I didn't ask him. And here's what's interesting. When he was that age, we had a ritual around making choices. Each of us would answer the question on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it to you to buy that new toy or get your room clean or play catch in the backyard? I could have asked my son, how important is having me at every one of your games? On a scale of 1 to 10, how disappointed would you be if I missed one of your games? I might have been surprised at his answers. Well, why didn't I ask those questions? Maybe even considering a future in which my son would be disappointed was so uncomfortable I wanted to avoid it. Now, as a reminder, you do not cause other people to be disappointed. Your actions create circumstances like my missing a game. However, the other person's thoughts about the circumstances, not the circumstances themselves, create their feelings. I remember a snow day. My son was doing a happy dance while I wrestled with my own anxiety about how I would manage my work obligations I planned to do when my son was at school. Same circumstances, a snow day, very different thoughts and feelings. So we arrive in adulthood bringing lessons we've been taught about disappointment. Then we become parents. What's our number one job? Keeping our kids safe. If you've been taught that disappointment is unsafe, doesn't it make sense that you'd want to protect your children from it? Then, if you have a child who is neurodivergent, whether it's OCD or ADHD or autism, you know that our culture is built for neurotypical children. It's already difficult for our kids to shine in a world that judges and dismisses them. Well, this is a far cry from our hope that every child is seen and celebrated. And that delivers a healthy dose of disappointment, both for us and for our kids. Now, way back then, before I did my own thought work, my brain offered an argument that went something like this. Okay, neurodivergent kids already get 3/4 of their daily or weekly or monthly quota of disappointment from their teachers and peers and family. I'll do what I can to keep them below the disappointment quota. Given all of this, of course we parents would try to shield our kids from excess disappointment. So why is this a problem? Well, disappointment is a part of life. We want to give our kids experience bouncing back from adversity, just like my parenting coach suggested. Plus, the alternatives to feeling disappointment have negative consequences. Efforts to avoid or escape or numb our feelings don't work. Your kids' compulsions are efforts at avoiding intense, unpleasant feelings. In the end, compulsions do more harm than good. Further, if you make choices based on avoiding the discomfort of disappointment, your world gets smaller as you close yourself off from experiences. In fact, this is one of the most feared consequences of unmanaged OCD. I would like to suggest that our parenting goal is to help our kids build confidence that they can live through any feeling they have. Once you know you can tolerate any feeling, there's nothing to fear ever again. So if you're not going to pass along the lessons your parents taught you about managing disappointment, what do you do instead? Well, I'd like to argue that it begins with you. Your ability to help your child manage his or her disappointment is contingent on your ability to get comfortable with your own disappointment. In the last podcast episode, we discussed a protocol. On a high level, here are the steps. First, recognize disappointment. Disappointment is just a feeling, and a feeling is nothing more than a sensation in your body. Where do you feel it in your body? What are some of the clues you might be disappointed? 7, give yourself permission to feel the disappointments. Sometimes it feels like your feelings will consume you, but they won't. If this seems totally intolerable, then just get a little dose. You can set a timer for 2 or 3 minutes to just feel the disappointment. If you find yourself resisting feeling disappointed, say, "Oh, how human of me." Then you might practice a thought like, "I'm feeling disappointment," or "This is what disappointment feels like." The process of naming it separates you from it. Third, manage your mind. Observe the thoughts that you have once you feel disappointment. Many people say abusive things to themselves that they would never say to people that they love. "Oh, things never go your way. Why do you even try?" Or "This is what happens when you get too big for your britches." Or "You're such a loser." So if you find yourself beating up on yourself, say, "Oh, how human of me. My brain has practiced these thoughts all my life." Then think a newer, kinder thought like, "It's possible I can live through disappointment," or "I'm stronger than my disappointment." Next, objectively describe the results you created. Let's say your disappointment because you set a goal but you didn't hit it. Business coach Dan Sullivan suggests that you should look forward as you set a goal, then look back as you measure your results. So let's say you decide that you want to regulate your anger after hearing yourself shouting at your kids, "Stop yelling!" You get through a week successfully regulating your anger, and then you have a blow up. What do you focus on? The one blow up or the entire week? Is it really that terrible if you shoot for the stars and wind up on the moon? Celebrate when you're moving in the right direction. And fifth, explore what you can do differently next time. So disappointment becomes your teacher. You have 2 choices to narrow the disappointment gap. First, you can change your dreams and expectations, or 2, figure out what you can do differently next time to get the results you want. So let's say you're disappointed because your own parents refuse to educate themselves about OCD, and they continue to see OCD as a moral character failing. What's the source of your disappointment? Well, you have a manual about how your parents should behave, and they're not following your manual. You think that if you just do things differently, your parents will comply with your manual, and then you won't be disappointed. You might try all sorts of tricks to inspire your parents to act differently, and you will continue to be disappointed. Your disappointment may be teaching you that efforts to make others follow your manual are futile. What if instead you decided to throw out the manual and accept your parents are as they are? When your dad says something hurtful, you say, "That's dad being dad." Of course, you create boundaries to keep yourself and your child safe. However, your focus is on the things that you control, like coaching your child what to say and what to do when people say hurtful things. One of my mentors summarizes the big idea about managing disappointment. She says, you go to the gym to get stronger. Go to the disappointment gym. Work out. It'll be hard and uncomfortable at first, but keep at it. It will get easier. Well, managing our own disappointment is one thing, but watching your child manage disappointment is quite another. You might feel the urge to just swoop in and make things better. And what if your radical act of courage as a parent is to coach your kids to feel their feelings, choose their thoughts on purpose, and treat themselves with more self-compassion? You can take your kids through the exact same steps you just learned about managing your own disappointment in an age-appropriate way. When your child is very young, you might need to do some emotional coaching. You can ask your child, "Hey, you look sad. What's going on?" Then they tell you the story, and you can say, "Oh, your best friend told your secret, and you expect friends to keep your secret. Have I got it?" And if they say yes, you can say, "Well, when people don't act the way you want them to act, you can be disappointed. Do you think that's what's going on with you?" And then you can help your young child notice what disappointment feels like in their body. Encourage activities to get the feelings out. It might be through drawing or singing or moving their bodies. As they get older, they can journal. Now, imagine if your kids could trust that it's safe to have any feeling. Imagine if you communicate to your kids with words and actions that it's safe for them to express any feeling to you in a way that's appropriate for your family, of course, no matter what. You might say, "Great idea, Dr. Vicki, but my child doesn't tell me anything." And I'm going to say something that could be hard to hear. It's possible that your child has learned that it's not safe to tell you how they're feeling, but you can change that. Have a conversation with your family. You could say, "When I was growing up, we kids learned that there were some things you just didn't talk about, like money. We learned that you don't feel or talk about unpleasant feelings like disappointment. I see what a high price I paid when we tried to pretend that disappointment does not exist. That's why I want to make our house a safe place to talk about any feeling that you have, including disappointment." Then be vulnerable and begin talking about your own disappointment. So let's say you ordered a pillow online. It arrives and it isn't the right color, or you don't like the fabric. You can say out loud, "I had an idea about what this pillow would be like based on the picture on the website. Then I got something very different than I expected. How disappointing." It could be that your child is reluctant to tell you about their disappointment because they think that you're going to launch in and just try to fix things. So let's say your child took a risk and wrote her college admissions essay about how she learned to master her OCD. Then she wasn't accepted. That college was her number one choice, and she says to you, "I wish I didn't talk about my OCD in the essay. That's why they rejected me." Now, of course, that thought may or may not be true, but you might be tempted to buy into her logic and just launch into your mother bear role and say, that's just not right. I'm going to make some calls and get that fixed. How about if you're willing to just sit with your child as they feel their disappointment? You can say, oh, I know how much you wanted to go to this college. I see how disappointed you are. I can just see how much it hurts. Your words and actions can say, I hear you. I see you. I'm here no matter what. Validate your kids' feelings by letting them know that it's completely normal to feel upset or let down. Remind them that the best way to get over a feeling is to go right through it. You can also help your kids expand their problem-solving and decision-making skills. Maybe this parent could encourage her daughter to call the admissions officer and get some insight into whether her transparency about her OCD factored into why she wasn't accepted. In summary, managing disappointment and other feelings differently than you were taught is a radical act of courage. You're building new parenting muscles. You and your kids are mastering new skills. So go to the disappointment gym, work out. It'll be hard and uncomfortable at first. Keep at it. It will get easier. These same ideas can help you and your child manage other uncomfortable feelings like guilt and shame and grief. Let's remember that disappointment is a part of life, and it's how we respond that truly matters. We can navigate through disappointments and come out stronger on the other end. Well, what do you think? I invite you to leave comments below. If you found value in this episode, please feel welcome to share it with others you know who are helping their adult children be freed from OCD. You've got this.